What's up everyone? So I just did a video about the iPad mini 4 and how that thing held up in 2018, the later part of 2018. And the reason that iPad is kind of still relevant now is because it's still getting iOS versions, and I think it's still going to get iOS versions. I think it's going to get iOS 13 as well. So that's an iPad that's still relevant, and it's one of the few iPads out there that are still supported with iOS 12. There's a lot of them, but there's also a lot of them that aren't supported anymore. And one of those iPads is actually the first iPad mini. Now this thing actually came out in 2012, which is the same year that the iPhone 5 came out. But the specs between this thing and the iPhone 5 are completely different. I'll tell you, the iPad mini is one of those devices that look better than they actually feel. And I think the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus kind of are in that same realm too, but the 6 and 6 Plus are much faster devices than the first gen iPad mini. Now, when this thing came out, I'll be honest, I was looking at the commercials for it. I was like, man, this thing is game changing. It looks so sick. It looked a lot different than the current iPads because the side bezels were smaller, just an overall smaller device. And I'm like, at the time I was like a little small kid, and when this thing came out, I'm like, man, like I don't really want to get a huge iPad. Obviously no one was going to give it to me anyway. But in my head, I'm like, you know, which one would I rather have? Would I rather have like an actual iPad? I think like the iPad 4 or whatever it was around that at the time, or an iPad mini 1. And in my head, I always chose the iPad mini 1 because of the size. I didn't know anything about the specs. I didn't know anything about the internals, but the way this device looks is definitely one of the pros for it. Now, I think the design definitely held up, but the internals have not held up at all, okay? Now, like I said, this thing came out in 2012, and looking around, I mean, it's a pretty familiar design. It literally looks just like an iPad mini now, like the iPad mini 4. The main difference in terms of internals would definitely be the home button, which is now a fingerprint sensor, but on top of that, also the screen. The resolution of this screen was 768 by 1024, and it only had 162 pixels per inch, which is crazy small. I mean, people are bashing the iPhone XR right now for having like 326 pixels per inch, and this thing has 162 pixels per inch, and this thing is a humongous panel. This is way bigger than the iPhone XR's panel, so that's kind of funny right there. And I don't really remember people like going all up in arms at the time because there were a lot of devices that weren't even like 720p. So it is what it is. It's an IPS panel. I'll tell you, the screen is definitely one of the worst aspects of this device. There's something that's way worse than this, but in the top 3 things wrong with this, I would definitely say the panel. It's not that good looking. I think it might have been good looking at a time, but it definitely is not one of those things that have held up. But that's not to take away what this device brought. They haven't really updated the iPad mini since the iPad mini 4, but I really think the iPad mini genre as a whole really had a run, and that kind of goes to software as well. You know, it started off with iOS 6, and eventually it did get iOS 9.3.5, and it stopped there. And, you know, that would have been a decent stopping point if this phone was spec'd heavier. This thing had like the worst internals I've ever seen in a device, and it was one of those few devices with iOS 9.3.5 that honestly it just did not handle that well. The iPhone 4S got iOS 9.3.5, and that didn't handle it well, and this device also does not handle it well either, but at least they got supported and at least it lasted that long. Now I keep talking about the internals. This is what I'm talking about. This is what makes this device like completely unusable in my opinion, okay? It has the Apple A5 chip, okay, which is kind of funny in and of itself. A device like this, you know, being as spec heavy as it is and it looks pretty decent, it has the Apple A5 chip, kind of funny, okay? Now it has a dual core CPU, but the worst thing about this thing is that it has 512 megabytes of RAM, not gigabytes, not gigabytes either, 512 megabytes of RAM, half a gig of RAM, which is crazy. At the time of 2012, I mean, the iPhone 5 was released, that thing had a gig of RAM, it had a full gig of RAM right there. I know I say it wrong, guys, I'm sorry. But that thing was capable, the iPhone 5, and it's still kind of somewhat capable, but the iPad mini 1, I mean, it was just in its own genre of like incapability. And maybe, I heard things at the time too, that the iPad mini at that point, I think when around 2013, around that time, people were saying the iPad mini was already kind of slow, and the specs kind of take it from there. I mean, it wasn't really spec'd to be like a heavy performing device, especially later on. Now, in my performance, I don't think it's good. It takes like multiple seconds to open up the settings panel, which is insane. It should never take that long to open up the settings panel, let alone open up like Safari or anything like that. And if you want to do like multitasking and things like that, you could just forget about it. Now, this is what's crazy. When I was looking at older reviews, and I've seen a lot of like, I think like 2-3 years ago, I've seen people do updated reviews on the iPad mini 1. And I always thought they were kind of lying because, you know, it looks like a capable device. It looks like a device where you can go and use it and everything like that to be fine. And I always thought those people were like heavy users and they just really just kind of overplayed of like how bad it was. But no, honestly, like I don't make any money. I actually kind of lose money by recommending you not get those devices because that means I can't use an affiliate link on that video. I'll tell you right now, this performance is not that good on this thing. you can't even do a basic thing. Like I said, opening the settings thing, it should not take that long on the device. And like scrolling through Safari, noticeable skip frames everywhere. It's just crazy slow. It's like, I don't even know why it's this slow. But what I will say and what I found interesting is when I started playing games, okay? Now Temple Run is one of those games that you can play on a rock and you'll be able to play it just fine. It's crazy. The amount of devices that are capable on Temple Run is insane. And that's why I have so much respect for those people who made Temple Run, because it's a game, it's like pretty decent, and you can play it on almost every single phone out there, whether you have like 300 gigs of RAM or whether you have like 1 megabyte of RAM. It's crazy. So Temple Run works perfectly fine. I ran Temple Run 2 on it as well. It does support it, and it played that fine as well. And I'll definitely say that Temple Run 2 graphics are way higher than Temple Run 1, so that's kind of interesting. I wasn't expecting that. But the thing that shocked me the most, and I think I have an explanation for it, is Real Racing 3. For some reason, Real Racing 3 runs okay on it. Like, it's kind of playable. I mean, it's definitely not as bad as I thought. Now, Real Racing 3 is a pretty heavy intensive game, and I always see it glitched out on like not all my Android phones, but the older ones that I usually test, like the Galaxy S4, devices like that, they usually don't do so well with Real Racing 3, which is kind of funny. But for the iPad mini 1, it was actually pretty decent. Now, my explanation for this is that because Real Racing 3 is one of those games that kind of benchmark your tablet or your phone or whatever, in the background it sees what specs you have, it reduces or increases the performance, the graphics, all those things for you to have the best and most enjoyable experience. So what I'll tell you is, if you took this exact game and the exact graphics and put it on like an iPhone like 4S, I'm sure it'll run fine too. Phone like an iPhone 6 or iPhone 6S, because the screen is high resolution, even a 6S Plus, 6 Plus, whatever, because the screen is high resolution, most likely it would benchmark the game higher. So sometimes that's why you see a discrepancy there. It just depends on how the game sees your device and sees whether it should like up in the graphics, lower the graphics, increase performance or decrease performance. So that's my little explanation of it. I don't know if it made any sense to you guys, but that's pretty much my explanation for why Real Racing 3 ran pretty well on this device. Now, to sum up the performance, I'll say it's hit or miss. I guess they never miss up. Man, I said that in the last video too. It's like in my head that joke rolls better than what it actually sounds like. But ultimately, performance is hit or miss, like I said. So don't get this thing if you're trying to find something that'll get you through college. I mean, this thing won't even get you through like 10 minutes of like going through the settings because it's so slow. Now, moving on to the camera, there's 2 cameras on it, one on the front, one on the back. Let's talk about the back one for a second. It's 5 megapixels. You know, it's an iPad camera. It's 1080. You can shoot 1080p videos on it. The front camera on like an iPhone 6S, in my opinion, is better than the back camera on an iPad mini 1. It's not that good at all. You can do some basic things with it, no slow-mo or anything like that. But, you know, it's a camera. I mean, I wouldn't even recommend you taking photos of nothing with it, so, but at least it had a camera in it. And I'm surprised it even had a front camera too. The front camera is 1.2 megapixels, and you can do things like FaceTime and other things like that, so that's pretty neat. I wasn't expecting that, but, you know, it is what it is. It's kind of cool. Overall, the cameras are definitely not one of those things you would want to brag about for one of these things, but it is what it is. Now, talking about the battery life, it has a 4,490 milliamp hour battery. Because this device is so old, I think that has a lot to do with the depreciation. Obviously, it has a lot to do with the degradation of this battery, but on top of that, iOS 9.3.5 wasn't the best for battery life, especially for this type of device. A device that has the Apple A5 chip and half a gig of RAM. You would assume that, oh, it's an older device, it could probably last forever. Not the truth. I think because the battery degraded a lot, but also because this iPad wasn't spec'd as good. And I heard that at the time when it was released, battery life was one of those things they bragged about. But now, I mean, it is a much smaller battery than a lot of other iPads that are out there. So it's not one of those things, like I said, I would brag about to people like, oh, my iPad lasts this long. It's not like that. So pretty much how I'll sum up the iPad mini 1. It's definitely 100% not worth it right now. I mean, I would really 100% recommend even an iPad mini 2 over this thing, but barely even an iPad mini 4. I mean, like, it's a good tablet, but I think people watching this aren't really necessarily trying to wonder if it's like whether they're still going to buy it personally. I think they're just kind of curious to know what it's about. And I'll tell you right now, I got this thing for around, I think $60, I think $50 to $60, maybe a little bit less, but around that ballpark. And I don't think it's worth it that much. I mean, it looks like a good tablet. This is what's crazy about it. It looks very premium because it was very premium at a time. And I do have to understand, and I'm trying to tell you guys, like, I still think it looks pretty decent. And I think it was important for a while, but right now I don't think anybody should be buying it. But that is my opinion. I think it brought a lot, but you know, I pretty much like already stated what I had to say, but that is pretty much it. I want to know what you guys think though. Do you think the iPad mini 1 is still important? Do you guys think it's not? Let me know in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your opinions, but hit that like button. That'll mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber we get really does count, so it'll mean so much if you guys could hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel that is also linked down below. I would really appreciate if you guys could check those out as well. Don't forget, I'm doing an iPhone giveaway. I'm giving away an iPhone in 2 weeks to someone random, and I'm giving away another iPhone 2 weeks after that. So in December, starting tomorrow, I'm giving away 2 iPhones. So if you want to enter that giveaway, click the iPhone giveaway link in the description below. It'll take you to a video, and it's literally free to enter. So go enter it. I really appreciate it. We already have like thousands of entries, so there's like 3 or 4 different ways to enter. So go check out that video, and hopefully you'll win. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.